It was a quiet morning on the farm. The sun had just started to rise, casting a soft golden light over the fields. Birds chirped in the distance, and a gentle breeze made the crops sway back and forth. The farmer had been up since dawn, as he always was. He walked along the rows of his fields, checking the plants, feeling the soil with his hands, and making sure everything was growing as it should. Life on the farm was simple, hard, but it was honest work, and he took pride in it. As he bent down to inspect a patch of vegetables, a sudden, sharp sound cut through the morning calm. It was the screech of tires on gravel, followed by a loud, terrifying crash. The farmer froze for a moment, heart pounding. That sound didn't belong here, not in this peaceful countryside. Without thinking, he dropped the basket of tools he had been carrying and ran toward the road. When he arrived, he could hardly believe his eyes. A car had flipped onto its side, smoke rising from the engine, and pieces of glass scattered across the dirt road. He could see the driver inside, slumped over, not moving. People often told stories about accidents happening far away to strangers, but this was real, right in front of him, and there was no time to wait for someone else. He had to act. He ran closer, calling out, "Hey, are you okay? Can you hear me?" The man inside groaned, barely lifting his head. Blood had trickled from a cut on his forehead. The farmer didn't hesitate. He grabbed the edge of the car door and tried to open it, but it was stuck. The metal had bent in the crash, locking him out. He looked around quickly. There was a heavy branch lying nearby. With all his strength, he lifted it and pried the door open just enough to reach inside. Carefully, he pulled the man out of the car. The driver's body was heavy, limp and fragile after the impact. The farmer's arms shook, but he kept going. Once he had the man on the ground, he checked for breathing and pulse. The man's chest was rising slowly. He was alive, but barely. The farmer took a deep breath and spoke softly. "It's okay, you're going to be fine, just hang on. Help is coming." By then, a few neighbors had started to appear, drawn by the noise. They watched as the farmer worked tirelessly, moving debris away and keeping the injured man safe. Some ran to call for an ambulance. The farmer didn't look at them. He was focused, determined, and calm in a way that surprised even himself. He had never faced anything like this before, but he didn't panic. The only thing that mattered was saving the man's life. As he waited, he talked to the man in the car, even though he could barely respond. "You're strong, you'll get through this," he said. His voice was steady, carrying a warmth that seemed to reassure the man. Even the small things mattered. The farmer held the man's hand, brushed away glass from his hair, and adjusted his position to make him more comfortable. People around watched in silence. There was no heroism in words here, only action, only care. Minutes later, the distant sound of sirens grew louder. The farmer stepped back, letting the paramedics take over. He explained everything quickly. How the accident had happened, how he had pulled the man out, and the injuries he had noticed. The medics nodded, impressed by how calmly he had handled the situation. "You did the right thing," one of them said. But the farmer shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do," he replied. But deep down, he knew he had gone further than most would. After the ambulance drove away, the farmer walked back toward his fields. His hands were scraped, clothes torn, but he barely noticed. He returned to his morning routine as if nothing extraordinary had happened. To him, it was just another day. He watered the crops, checked the soil, and listened to the soft sounds of the morning. Life continued, and that was the way it always had been. What the farmer didn't know at that moment was who he had saved. To him, it was just a man in trouble, someone who needed help. But the man was far from ordinary. He was wealthy beyond imagination, a billionaire whose name was recognized in boardrooms and business circles around the world. He had been traveling through the countryside to clear his mind, away from the chaos of his life, when the accident happened. If it had not been for the farmer, the outcome could have been very different. The farmer's humility was extraordinary. He never thought about fame or reward. He didn't ask for money or recognition. He didn't know that the news of his actions would soon spread far beyond his small town. For him, saving a life was simply the right thing to do. It was a lesson he had learned from his parents, who had taught him the value of helping others without expecting anything in return. Even the neighbors who had watched were inspired by what they saw. They had seen acts of kindness before, but this was different. This was bravery combined with compassion. The farmer had risked his own safety, had lifted a man from a dangerous situation, and had stayed calm when others might have panicked. People began to talk about it in the local store, at church, and on the streets. Everyone agreed on one thing. This was the work of someone special. Later that day, the farmer sat on the porch of his small house, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. He thought about the morning, about the accident, about the man he had saved. He didn't think about wealth, about fame, or about what might come next. He only thought about life, about the fragility of it, and about how important it was to help whenever someone was in need. That quiet moment of reflection reminded him why he worked so hard on his farm, why he lived the simple life he did, and why the people around him mattered so much. At night, he went to bed with the same sense of peace he always had. The world was unpredictable, but he believed that good deeds mattered even when no one noticed. He didn't know that soon. The man whose life he had saved would try to find him, wanting to meet the farmer who had changed his life. He didn't know that one act of kindness would ripple out in ways he couldn't imagine, but he slept that night with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had done something important even if it went unnoticed by the rest of the world. And so, the day ended quietly on the farm, with the farmer continuing his life, unaware that his simple act of courage and humanity had already set the stage for something extraordinary. The car crash was over, the man was safe, and life went on. But in the heart of the farmer, something subtle had shifted. A sense of purpose, of connection, and of the power of helping others filled him. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a story that would touch many lives, including his own. The days after the accident passed quietly on the farm. The farmer returned to his usual routine, tending to the fields, feeding the animals, and fixing tools that needed repair. The morning sun still rose over the same golden fields, and the gentle breeze still made the crops sway. Life felt ordinary, as it always did, and the farmer liked it that way. He had no reason to think that anything about that day would change his life at all. Yet, somewhere far away, the man whose life had been saved was beginning to think about the farmer. He remembered the rough hands that had lifted him from the wrecked car, the calm voice that had reassured him, and the determination in the farmer's eyes. In the hospital room, he asked the nurses repeatedly about the man who had rescued him. "Who is he asked. "I need to find him. I must meet him." The nurses, unfamiliar with the details, tried to explain that he was just a local man who had helped, but the billionaire insisted on knowing more. He wanted to thank the man properly. News of the accident had reached a few local reporters who were curious about the mysterious hero farmer. They tried to interview neighbors, who all spoke the same words. He didn't do it for money. He didn't do it for fame. He just helped because it was the right thing to do. These words traveled slowly, first through the town, then beyond, reaching online platforms and news outlets. People were intrigued. In a world full of stories about greed and selfishness, here was someone who had acted purely out of kindness. Meanwhile, the farmer went about his days without any thought of recognition. He woke up early, walked through the dew-covered fields, checked the soil, and made sure the animals were fed. He repaired fences, carried water to the crops, and took pride in seeing everything grow. Helping others was part of his life, but he rarely expected thanks. For him, life was about effort, honesty, and care. The memory of pulling the man from the car remained, of course, but it did not make him feel special. He felt that anyone in his place would have done the same. At the hospital, the billionaire's thoughts returned constantly to the farmer. He was struck not by the farmer's skill, but by his humility. How many people in this world would risk themselves for someone they did not even know? And how many would act without expecting anything in return? The billionaire realized that acts of true kindness were rare, and he wanted to make sure the farmer knew how much he mattered. This desire grew stronger each day as he recovered. Back in the small town, the neighbors continued talking about the event. Some went as far as to say it could change the town's history, even if just a little. Children whispered to each other, about the hero farmer who had saved a life, and parents reminded them of the importance of helping others. The story spread slowly like the ripples of water in a pond, reaching people who had never even been near the farm. For the first time, the farmer became part of conversations that were larger than his fields, larger than the animals he cared for, and larger than the town itself. But even with the attention growing, the farmer remained grounded. He did not seek interviews, did not ask for recognition, and did not think of himself as special. He worked hard every day, believing that the right thing was its own reward. And yet, as he helped his neighbors repair a barn one afternoon, he noticed something unusual. A man in a well-tailored suit was asking about him. The man seemed familiar somehow, though the farmer could not place him. The man introduced himself politely, explaining that he had been the one in the car during the accident. The farmer blinked in surprise. "That car was yours?" he asked, barely believing it. The man nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes," he said. "I wanted to thank you properly for what you did. You saved my life." The farmer shrugged, brushing his hands on his pants. "I just did what anyone should do," he said quietly. But the man insisted, repeating his thanks and explaining how grateful he was. It soon became clear to the farmer that this man was not just any traveler. He spoke differently. His presence carried a confidence that was unfamiliar in this town. People began to gather slowly, curious about the visitor and his polite insistence on meeting the farmer. They noticed the way he looked around, the small gestures of appreciation and the sincere gratitude in his voice. This was a man who understood the value of human life and was willing to honor it. Over the next few days, the billionaire spent time on the farm. He watched the farmer work, helped carry water to the crops, and even offered to assist with repairing fences. The farmer was initially hesitant to accept help, feeling that he needed to do the work himself. But slowly, he realized that the visitor genuinely wanted to show gratitude, not control or command. This made him respect the man even more. Here was someone powerful yet humble, who was showing kindness without demanding anything in return. The billionaire also began asking questions about the farmer's life, not out of curiosity for gossip, but because he genuinely wanted to understand the world he had saved. He learned about the struggles of farming, the unpredictable weather, the costs of planting and harvesting, and the hopes that farmers carry each day. The billionaire was surprised to see how much skill, patience, and courage it took to live a life like this. He realized that heroes could exist anywhere, not just in the boardrooms or grand cities, but in quiet fields, where hard work and care met every morning with hope. The farmer, meanwhile, started to feel a mixture of pride and unease. He had saved a life, yes, but he had done nothing extraordinary for recognition. Yet now here was a man whose life was wealth beyond imagination, expressing gratitude in ways the farmer had never imagined. Gifts, opportunities, and offers of support were mentioned, but the farmer did not allow his thoughts to drift toward greed or fame. He remained rooted in the values that had guided him all his life: honesty, humility, and kindness. Word of the meeting slowly spread. People from nearby towns began coming to see the farmer and the man he had saved. They listened to the story, admired the bravery, and celebrated the kindness that had made it all possible. Children asked questions wide-eyed, while elders nodded with approval. Everyone seemed to understand that what had happened was more than luck. It was humanity at its best. The farmer listened to these stories quietly, still unaware of the true scale of the impact he had made. During one quiet evening, after a long day of work, the billionaire and the farmer sat together on the edge of the field. The sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and pink. The billionaire turned to the farmer and said, "You don't know how rare it is to find someone like you. You saved my life, not for money, not for recognition, but simply because it was the right thing to do. That is something the world needs more of." The farmer looked at him and smiled humbly. "I just did what anyone should do," he replied softly, but inside he felt a quiet warmth. For the first time, he sensed that his small act of kindness had touched something much larger than himself. That night, the farmer reflected on the past week. He had seen fear, courage, gratitude, and generosity all in the same short time. He had learned that a single act of helping someone in need could change not only that person's life, but also his own. He slept with a sense of peace, knowing that life could be unpredictable, but kindness had the power to make it better. He did not yet know the full extent of how much his life would change, but he felt a quiet anticipation. Something important was unfolding, and he was at the center of it, not because of wealth or fame, but because of his humanity. The next morning, the farmer rose early, as always. The fields glistened with dew, the birds sang their songs, and the breeze made the crops dance. Life went on, but it was different now. He had met a man who saw the value in him, who appreciated the courage and care that had always been part of his life. And while he continued to work with the same dedication as before, he knew that the world had noticed something remarkable, something he had done without even thinking. And so, the days moved forward. The farmer continued his routine, tending to the crops, feeding the animals, and repairing fences. The billionaire stayed nearby, learning from the farmer, observing his work, and planning how to honor him in the future. The bond between them grew quietly, built on respect, gratitude, and a shared understanding that life could be fragile and precious. Through one small act of bravery, two very different lives had intersected, and the consequences of that meeting would ripple outward in ways neither of them could fully imagine. The farmer remained humble, grounded and unaware of just how extraordinary his actions had become. He cared for the land, for the animals, and for the people around him. He acted out of love, compassion, and responsibility. And while the world was beginning to take notice, he stayed true to himself. He had learned a lesson that day at the crash site. True courage was quiet, true kindness was selfless, and the simplest acts could change the course of life forever. Weeks had passed since the accident, and the farmer's life seemed to return to its normal rhythm. Every morning he walked through the fields, checking the crops, feeding the animals, and repairing fences where the wind or animals had caused damage. Life on the farm was simple, repetitive, and hard, but he found comfort in that simplicity. Yet beneath the quiet routine, something was beginning to change. The billionaire had not left. In fact, he was becoming a regular presence at the farm. At first, the farmer had been unsure what to make of it. Why was a man of such wealth and influence spending time in a small town, helping him with daily chores? He couldn't understand why someone would want to be there without any obvious reason. The billionaire seemed different from anyone he had ever met. He didn't act superior or distant. Instead, he listened carefully, helped willingly, and spoke with respect. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the fields and birds chirped in the background, the billionaire turned to the farmer. "I've been thinking a lot about what you did for me," he said. "You didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. You saved my life without asking for anything in return. That kind of courage, it's rare. I want to honor you for it." The farmer shook his head slowly, brushing dirt off his hands. "I don't need anything. I was just doing what anyone would do," he said softly. But the billionaire's expression didn't show anger or impatience. It showed understanding and sincerity. "You may think that, but the world needs to know," the billionaire continued. "Not for me, but for you. People should know that there are still people like you, people who act out of kindness and courage without thinking about money or fame." The farmer looked at him, still humble, but curious. "I don't know if I can accept anything like that," he said. "I just live my life and do what I think is right." The billionaire smiled. "I know, and that's exactly why this matters. You don't seek recognition, and that makes you truly special. I want to make sure that your life, and the lives of those around you, can be better because of what you did. Not to change who you are, but to help in ways you might not be able to on your own." Over the next few days, the billionaire began to take small steps. He helped repair broken equipment on the farm, donated supplies for seeds and tools, and even worked alongside the farmer in the fields. The farmer watched quietly, still hesitant, but slowly began to see the sincerity in the man's actions. It was not about control or showing off. It was about gratitude and respect, something deeper than money or status. Neighbors began noticing the visits too. At first, they were surprised and curious. What was this man doing here? Why was he so interested in a small farm and a quiet life? Slowly, they understood that he was there because of gratitude. He was there because a life had been saved, and that act of bravery deserved acknowledgement. The story spread quietly without fanfare, but its impact was profound. People in the town began talking about courage, kindness, and the difference one person could make. One morning, the billionaire asked the farmer to sit with him under a large tree at the edge of the field. The breeze was cool, carrying the scent of freshly turned soil. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "Your work here is important, but I know it's hard. I know how challenging life on a farm can be. I want to help make things easier for you, for your family and for your community, not as charity but as a way to honor the courage you showed." The farmer listened quietly. He felt a mixture of humility, gratitude, and hesitation. Accepting help was not something he was used to. He had worked hard all his life, relying on his own strength, determination, and patience. But as he looked at the man sitting across from him, he realized that this offer was different. It was not about taking advantage or control. It was about partnership, about lifting each other up in a way that honored life itself. Over the next week, the billionaire began introducing improvements on the farm. New tools arrived along with better irrigation equipment to make planting and harvesting easier. Seeds of high-quality crops were provided, and the farmer began to see the possibilities of growth he had never imagined. At first he was cautious, unsure if accepting so much help would change who he was. But gradually he realized that accepting help did not make him weak. It simply allowed him to continue his work and to do it better for the people he cared about most. One afternoon, while fixing a fence, the billionaire asked the farmer about his childhood, about how he had learned to work the land, and about the values his parents had instilled in him. The farmer spoke simply, honestly, and with quiet pride. He talked about the long days in the fields, about learning patience from the seasons, and about the importance of honesty and respect for others. The billionaire listened closely, fascinated by how a life so different from his own could hold such wisdom. "You've lived a life that many would overlook," the billionaire said, "but there is so much strength in what you've done. It's not just about saving my life, it's about living a life that matters every day. People should know that heroism isn't only in grand gestures, it's in quiet courage, in care, in dedication." The farmer nodded, appreciating the words but feeling that his life was just life. To him, living honestly and helping others when needed was simply what he had always done. The relationship between the farmer and the billionaire grew quietly but deeply. They worked side by side, laughed together, and shared stories of life and struggle. The billionaire learned from the farmer about resilience, patience, and humility. The farmer learned from the billionaire that gratitude and recognition could be offered without changing the essence of who a person was. Both realized that their meeting had created a bond that transcended wealth, status, or background. Neighbors began seeing changes too. They saw the farm prospering, and they saw the farmer still working with the same dedication he had always had. They saw the billionaire treating the farmer as an equal, not as someone to impress or control. Slowly, the town began to appreciate that true acts of kindness could create ripple effects. The story of the farmer and the man he had saved became a lesson for the community. Courage and humanity mattered more than wealth or status. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the billionaire said, "I want to do more. I want to make sure your family is taken care of, that your community can benefit from your hard work, and that the values you live by are honored. I don't want to change who you are. I just want to make sure that what you've done, what you continue to do, can have an even greater impact." The farmer looked at the fading sunlight and considered the offer. He realized that accepting this help did not mean abandoning his values. It meant using opportunities to do even more good. It meant improving the lives of others, just as he had saved a life when someone needed it. A quiet understanding passed between them. One life saved had become the beginning of something larger, something neither of them could have predicted. Over the following weeks, the billionaire worked with the farmer to make improvements that went beyond the farm. Educational resources were offered for the children in the town. Clean water systems were installed, and tools for local artisans were provided. The farmer's humility remained intact, but he began to see the ways his actions and the billionaire's support could change many lives. Together they were building something that neither could have done alone. Despite all the attention and improvements, the farmer stayed grounded. He rose with the sun, cared for the animals, tended the crops, and repaired fences as he had always done. But now he worked knowing that the world had noticed his courage and that the simplest act, saving a man in need, had created opportunities to help many more. He realized that bravery and kindness, even when unseen, could grow into something extraordinary. The billionaire often said, "You've taught me more than I could have imagined. Not about business or money or power. You've shown me what courage and humanity really mean. I hope the world will see that too." The farmer smiled quietly, feeling a deep satisfaction that was different from anything money could buy. He had acted without expectation, and yet the result was changing not only one life but many, and so life continued on the farm. The crops grew taller and healthier, the animals thrived, and the community began to feel the quiet impact of generosity and courage. The farmer remained humble, honest, and dedicated, but he also began to understand that his simple act of saving a life had become a force for greater good. One act of humanity had turned into a ripple of hope, gratitude, and change that neither he nor the billionaire would ever forget. By the end of this part of the story, the farmer had begun to see a future he had never imagined. He understood that his courage had value beyond the moment of the accident. He realized that kindness could create real change, and that sometimes helping someone in need could lead to opportunities to help many more. The world was larger than his fields, and yet through his actions he had found a place within it, a role that was meaningful, powerful, and quietly heroic. Life on the farm was beginning to feel different, though the farmer continued his daily routine as he always had. He rose with the sun, checked the crops, fed the animals, and repaired fences where needed. Yet there was a quiet change in the air. Things were happening that he had never imagined, all because of a simple act of kindness he had done weeks earlier. He had saved a man's life not knowing who he was, and now that act was creating opportunities far beyond the farm. The billionaire had grown closer over the past weeks, not just as a visitor, but as someone who genuinely wanted to help. He was no longer simply expressing gratitude. He was actively finding ways to make a real difference in the farmer's life and the lives of those around him. One morning, he asked the farmer to walk with him through the fields. "I want to show you something," he said. The farmer nodded, curiosity mixed with caution. He had learned that the man's offers were always sincere, but he was still humble and careful not to let it change who he was. As they walked, the billionaire explained, "I've been thinking about your family, about the people who depend on you, and about the community here. Your courage saved a life, and that same courage can now create opportunities for others. I want to help, but I want to do it in a way that respects who you are, not changes you." The farmer listened quietly, taking in the words. They were different from the usual discussions he had about crops, seasons, or repairs. These words carried weight, promise, and a deep understanding of human connection. Over the next few days, the billionaire introduced several improvements to the farm. First, he brought in new tools and equipment that made planting, watering, and harvesting easier. The farmer was hesitant at first, unsure if accepting so much help was right, but the billionaire reassured him. "This is not charity," he said. "It's gratitude. You have done something extraordinary, and now we can work together to make life better for you and everyone around you." Slowly, the farmer began to see that accepting help did not make him weak. It allowed him to do more good. The billionaire didn't stop at the farm. He wanted to make a difference in the community as well. He asked the farmer about the needs of the people nearby, the schools, the roads, the water supply, and the health facilities. The farmer spoke honestly, describing the challenges that families faced, the children who struggled to get an education, and the elderly who needed care. The billionaire listened attentively, taking notes and planning actions that could make life easier for the whole town. One morning, the billionaire suggested a meeting with the local school. The farmer accompanied him, curious but unsure what to expect. When they arrived, the principal welcomed them warmly, and the billionaire explained that he wanted to provide books, supplies, and better learning resources for the children. The farmer watched quietly, feeling a sense of pride and humility. He had never imagined that his actions could lead to such changes, yet here they were. Children smiled, teachers expressed gratitude, and the town began to feel hope for the future. At the farm, the billionaire also helped install irrigation systems that made watering crops more efficient. The farmer worked alongside him, showing him how things had been done before and learning new methods that would help him in the future. They laughed together as they worked, sharing stories about life, challenges, and dreams. The billionaire never acted as if he were superior. He treated the farmer as an equal, respecting his experience and knowledge. This earned the farmer's trust even more, and slowly he began to open up about his own hopes and dreams. One evening, after a long day in the fields, the billionaire and the farmer sat under the shade of a tree, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "I've seen what courage looks like," the billionaire said softly. "It's not about wealth power, or recognition. It's about acting when it matters, even when no one is watching. That is what you showed me, and that is what I want the world to know." The farmer nodded quietly, feeling a warmth in his heart. He had never considered his actions as extraordinary. To him, it was simply the right thing to do. The improvements on the farm continued. New seeds arrived, promising better harvests. Tools and machinery reduced the heavy labor that had once consumed most of the farmer's days. He began to notice subtle changes. The crops were healthier, the animals were better cared for, and he had more time to focus on planning and nurturing. Yet through it all, he remained humble. He worked as he always had, waking early, staying late, and putting care into every small task. The billionaire watched this quietly, admiring the farmer's dedication and integrity. Word of the changes began to spread in the town. Neighbors noticed the improvements and were inspired by the partnership between the farmer and the man he had saved. They saw that true kindness could ripple outward, creating opportunities that went beyond a single act. Children talked about courage, families discussed generosity, and the community slowly began to feel a renewed sense of hope. The farmer became a quiet role model, not because he sought attention, but because his actions spoke louder than words. During this time, the billionaire also arranged for resources to support local farmers in the area. Workshops were held to teach new farming techniques, improve crop quality, and manage resources more efficiently. The farmer helped lead these sessions, sharing his knowledge and experience with others. He discovered that helping others was rewarding in ways he had never imagined. Each farmer who improved their crops, each child who learned to read better, and each family who had easier access to clean water became part of the ripple effect started by a single act of courage. The billionaire also wanted to support the farmer's family directly. He provided resources for education, healthcare, and housing improvements. The farmer accepted these gifts with gratitude but without pride. He understood that they were not handouts. They were opportunities to create a better life and continue the cycle of kindness. He worked even harder, motivated not by wealth or recognition, but by the chance to improve life for his family and community. One afternoon, as they walked through the farm together, the billionaire said, "I've seen many people in my life, but very few act with the courage and humility that you show every day. The world could learn so much from you." The farmer smiled, humbled by the praise but careful to remain grounded. "I only do what is right," he said. "That's all anyone can do." The billionaire nodded, understanding that the farmer's simplicity and integrity were what made his actions extraordinary. As the days passed, the farm continued to flourish and the farmer's life improved in ways he had never imagined. The crops were healthier, the community was stronger, and children had access to education and resources they had never seen before. Yet through it all, the farmer remained the same man he had always been. He rose with the sun, worked hard, cared deeply, and acted with kindness. Nothing had changed about his values, but everything had changed about the opportunities now available to him and those around him. At night, when the work was done and the farm was quiet, the farmer would sit on the porch and watch the stars. He reflected on how life could shift in a single moment, how a simple act of kindness could grow into something much larger. He thought about the man he had saved, who had become more than a visitor. He had become a partner, a friend, and someone who valued courage and humanity as much as the farmer did. For the first time, the farmer realized that even small actions could have enormous consequences. The billionaire often joined him on the porch, and they would talk about life, the future, and the lessons learned from the accident. "It's amazing how one moment can change so many lives," the billionaire said one night. The farmer nodded quietly, thinking of the day he had pulled a man from a crashed car. "It's not just me," he replied. "It's everyone who does what is right, even when no one is watching." The billionaire smiled, knowing that this was exactly the lesson he wanted to share with the world. In the weeks that followed, the town began to feel the full impact of their work together. Families had more food, children had access to better education, and the community had a renewed sense of hope. The farmer remained humble, continuing his work without expecting recognition, while the billionaire quietly ensured that every improvement was sustainable and meaningful. Their partnership showed that courage, kindness, and gratitude could create real change, even in the most unexpected places. And so, life on the farm continued. But it was different now. The farmer still woke up early, worked hard, and cared deeply for the land and the people around him. Yet there was a quiet sense of pride and purpose that had grown from his simple act of saving a life. He understood that true courage and kindness were powerful, not just in the moment, but for years to come. Through one selfless act, an entire community had begun to thrive, and the farmer remained at the center of it, humble, hardworking, and quietly heroic. By the end of this part, the farmer had come to realize that helping others, acting with courage, and staying true to his values had created opportunities far beyond what he could have imagined. His life had changed, but not because of wealth or fame. It had changed because he had acted with humanity, and that humanity had been recognized, appreciated, and shared with the world in a way that honored both him and those around him. Life on the farm had changed, yet somehow it had remained the same. The farmer still woke up before dawn, walked through the dew-covered fields, fed the animals, repaired fences, and worked tirelessly under the sun. But now there was a quiet sense of pride and purpose that hadn't been there before. The farm was flourishing. The crops were healthier and the animals were well cared for. The farmer had more time, thanks to the improvements introduced by the billionaire, and he used that time to think, to plan, and to continue helping others. The community had also begun to feel the ripple effects of the farmer's bravery. Schools were better equipped, families had access to clean water, and local farmers were learning techniques that allowed them to grow more crops and provide for their families. People in the town spoke differently now. They spoke with hope, with confidence that hard work and kindness could lead to real change. The farmer, as humble as ever, continued to live quietly, rarely acknowledging the attention or recognition that had come his way. The billionaire, however, wanted to ensure that the farmer's actions and the ripple of good they created were remembered and celebrated. He arranged for gatherings in the community, not as a show of wealth, but as an opportunity for people to connect, to learn from each other, and to share their stories. The farmer participated, sometimes quietly, sometimes speaking, but always focused on helping others understand that courage and kindness mattered more than anything else. One afternoon, while walking through the fields with the billionaire, the farmer reflected on everything that had happened. "I never imagined that saving someone could change so much," he said softly, looking at the golden crops swaying in the breeze. The billionaire nodded. "It's not just saving a life," he said. "It's about inspiring others, creating opportunities, and showing the world that one act of kindness can lead to countless others." The farmer smiled, realizing that his actions, though simple and unassuming, had already touched more lives than he could ever count. The farmer's family had also begun to experience the benefits of his bravery. Children who once walked long distances to school now had transportation, books, and supplies. His parents had access to better health care and support, and the house that had once been modest and worn was now stronger, more comfortable, and able to withstand harsh weather. Yet the farmer never boasted or bragged. He continued to rise early, work hard, and live by the values he had always held dear: honesty, humility, and care for others. One evening, after a long day in the fields, the billionaire and the farmer sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air carried the scent of fresh earth and growing crops. "I've learned so much from you," the billionaire said quietly. "Not about business or wealth, but about life, courage, and humanity. You've shown me that true value is in how we treat others, not in what we own." The farmer smiled softly, humbled by the words. "I just do what feels right," he replied. "That's all anyone can do." The town continued to thrive. Local farmers shared knowledge, families supported one another, and children grew up learning the importance of helping when someone was in need. The farmer had become a quiet hero, not because of fame, but because his actions had shown the real meaning of courage. People respected him, not for what he owned, but for who he was. A man willing to risk himself to help another and to live honestly every day.